right. So I think it's best to start with who we are. So I'm Ari, head of brand, and I'm here with two of the most important members of Island, Mike Fay, CEO and co-founder, Brian Kenyon, Chief Strategy Officer, founding member. And I think it's best to start with life before Island. What were the events, thoughts, circumstances leading up to Island's formation?
Oh, well, Brian and I met at McAfee, where he joined via the Foundstone acquisition. I joined a bit later as part of the team that was brought on to kind of relaunch McAfee after years. And, that was almost a couple decades ago. We spent a long time there, finally becoming CTO and GM of the enterprise business. And we built so many amazing products and really, got to leave a mark on cybersecurity, working with just absolutely phenomenal people that have later gone on to found amazing businesses. So it was a great experience. And in that journey, we worked on almost one of everything, from threat research to DLPs to endpoints, to firewalls. Whether it was acquisition or organic growth, it was kind of one through the whole process. Then once we got to a point where we wanted to do something different, we went and joined up with Blue Coat, where I took on a role as president and COO, and he took on chief strategy officer. And we really focused on, taking that whole network security to the next level. And that was a phenomenal run. Worked again with great people. A lot of our people joined us. A lot of people that now are with Island joined us. And in that journey, I ran across Dan Amiga, who was the co-founder of Fireglass, the remote browsing technology. And we actually acquired his company right as we were getting bought by Symantec, where I took on the same roles, and so did Brian. And so that started a great experience with Dan, who is now the co-founder here with me. And then through that whole Symantec journey, I finally got to the point where I wasn't excited about building the next version of something. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We need people to keep innovating on all major platforms. But I lost the passion for building another endpoint, another DLP, another network, anything. And so I stepped away from cybersecurity for a while and actually even retired, I thought. And then Dan approached me with this idea for Island. And at the time, the idea was a better way to browse. What if you have full control of the browser at the user level? What would you do? And it was compelling. And the reason it was compelling out of the gate for me was just this simple awareness of how are we using a consumer technology in the enterprise? We don't do that for anything. Our conference tables aren't normal tables. They're enterprise tables. So you knew there was a wonderful idea in there. But I wasn't sure it was an idea I wanted to devote all my time to because, again, it was just a better way to browse. And that's where, Brian engaged and was exposed to the idea and started to see additional use cases. And
I picked up where, Mike really left off, and I had my first conversation with Dan after our journey at Symantec together. And I saw what Mike saw immediately, but then I started to see so much more of what it could become. And it was with that when Mike and I started re-engaging and thinking about the possibilities that could become if this became a fully featured platform for the enterprise.
Yeah, we're actually on a long walk one day. We were talking on the phone. This was COVID time, right? So none of us could see each other. And I talked to Dan, I talked to Brian, I got back on the phone with Brian, and we started to realize how this could impact the future work and how browsing was just a small use case. And it really started to kick in of what would happen if the browser was a collaborative member of the stack. And not just for cybersecurity, but for IT. And all of a sudden, it wasn't about a secure browser anymore. It wasn't about defeating, different malware or 0 days, although all those things matter. It was about these massive use cases. It was about enabling that future work and truly embracing security by design, which was a concept we talked about at McAfee decades before. And at the time, while it was a wonderful concept, you never really got to be security by design because you weren't part of the design. You weren't part of the application stack. You weren't part of the OS. And so here we found ourselves with this browser built on Chromium, this massive, wonderful, great open source project that is not only the application, it's the OS. And we could build security directly into it. And those use cases just started to roll. So I called back up Dan and asked if he still wanted to be partners, and he did. And about 2 weeks later, we raised our first $20 million in seed funding. We were very fortunate with many of the most innovative and valuable VCs wanting to help us achieve this. And we ended up with Sequoia and CyberStarts, and then it's been just a sprint since that day on.
So that's probably a really important kind of inflection point, that in those initial conversations with investors, kind of your first chance to see the outside world's reaction to this idea. Maybe take us through those initial conversations, their reactions, how you kind of framed this idea for them.
I will tell you, the bulk of the VCs got it right away. They understood it was a market that was ripe for disruption. It was an idea they hadn't heard before. It was a team they could rally behind. And the TAM, the addressable market, the impact it could have, the value it could deliver was very large. And some of us brought their favorite customers into the conversation for us to vet it with. We had, of course, already done that with ours, calling all these amazing CISOs we'd worked with for years before we ever approached a VC. And in that journey, the use cases kept growing. The VCs brought new use cases to us. They'd say, well, why wouldn't you work on this? Or what about adding this? And it just kept growing and growing. But the beautiful part was, it really didn't change what we were going to build. It just changed the reasons why you'd want it. So with all these great ideas, it didn't send Dan or I or Brian back to the drawing board of what has to be built, just new motivations for it. And I think we, in about a 2-week time period, probably did, 100
Calls.
Yeah, 100 VC meetings, and we're fortunate enough to get some great term sheets from some absolutely phenomenal investors.
Yeah. For me, the experience was very interesting because having been in the market for a long time in cybersecurity and sold myriad of technologies, the feel with your customer was always the same. You explained your solution. They asked you some pointed questions about what it could do or how it compared to the market. And if it was compelling enough, maybe the conversation went further. But this was completely different with Island. Even in our early validation calls with CISOs we'd worked for years, after about the first 5 minutes of talking to them, it became a workshop.
Yeah.
It became, well, if you do that, then you can do this, and you can do this, and you can do this. And so when Mike, you talk about, how these use cases grew, for the first time in my life, the use cases grew from outside of us. They grew directly from the customers.